Welcome everybody to Own Your Own Credit Scores. My name is Don Culp and I'm a workshop presenter with EY. Really have three key objectives that we're looking to accomplish over the next, say, 45 minutes or so. The first one is to have everyone understand the importance of your credit scores and also how those credit scores are calculated. So that's our first objective. The second one is we like everyone to understand how you can both maintain and increase your credit scores over time. And third, and I think most importantly, we'll talk a little bit about the resources that are available to you. So after we complete today's session, you can get assistance with any of your financial planning needs. We'll take the Q&As at the end of today's session. So as we go along, if you do have any questions, if you could just pop them into the chat, we'll address them at the end of the slide presentation. So let's do a quick review of the resources that are available to you. So the first one is the EY Navigate Planner line. So we see the toll-free number here. So any questions that you have after today's session on anything in today's content or any financial planning issues that you need assistance with, you can call the toll-free number that you see here, 1-877-927-1047. That's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So EY Navigate Planners, they don't sell any types of insurance. They don't sell investments. They don't manage money. They're completely objective, and their only objective is to talk to you about what's important to you financially and help you put a plan into place to accomplish your financial goals. So again, at no cost to you, you can pick up the line and talk to EY Navigate Planners. EY Navigate Digital. So EY Navigate Digital is an online site if you'd like to do some additional research on what we talk about today or other financial planning issues. There's articles there, there's calculators there if you'd like to run some numbers, other tools and resources that are available to you. Also, there's an app available for download. So rather, if you'd like to do your planning on your phone rather than on your computer, you can do that. I like to call that having a financial planner in your pocket. So if you download the app, both Google and Apple, that's available there for you. And EY Navigate Group Learning. So today's session is part of EY Navigate Group Learning. And also if you register on the EY Navigate digital website, we do monthly live webinars on various financial planning topics. So you can tune into those sessions. You can chat live with planners during those sessions. If you don't have the time to make one of those live sessions, all of the sessions are recorded and they're available on the EY Navigate digital website. So if you get a chance, you might want to head over to the EY Navigate digital website and take a look at some of those recordings that are there, because there are a variety of sessions on different topics that are available. So a personal action plan. So we're going to talk about various topics today, but it's important that not only you learn about what we're going to talk about today, but you'll also take some action steps. So as we go throughout today's session, I'll indicate a few action steps you might want to consider. And at the end of today's session, we'll also put a list together of different action steps you might want to think about directly related to credit scores. So let's jump into today's session. So let's talk a little bit about credit reports before we get to credit scores, because your credit scores are driven by the information that's in those credit reports. So what are credit reports? They contain information about you and your use of credit. So they're very specific to you. They're compiled by the three major credit bureaus. So those credit bureaus are Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. So the three major credit unions, three major credit bureaus that are out there, and they take your information and that data then is fed over to the credit score companies that are there. So what type of information is contained in these credit reports? So we have three different types of information. We have account information that's out there. So this is the type of information that you would think you would be in your credit report. So account information, that includes things such as the balance in your account that's in there, the lender's name over time, and all that type of information related to a particular account that you have outstanding. Then there's things such as matters of public record. So those are things such as bankruptcies and tax liens, civil judgments, foreclosures, and wage garnishments. So for account information, that information is fed to the major credit bureaus by the lender. So the credit card companies and the mortgage companies and those types of entities. But the major credit bureaus, they have to go out and get these matters of public record on their own. So the government doesn't feed that into the credit bureaus. And then credit inquiries. So if you go out and you sit back and say, well, I'd like to reach out to a particular lender to see if I can get a loan, that will be what's called a hard hit to your credit report that's out there. So you'll see that type of information in your credit report and say, oh yeah, I remember I reached out to this lender to see if I could get a loan there. You'll also see what are called soft hits in your credit report. And that's where lenders may start looking for you and might sit back and say, let's start searching for people that we think are a good credit risk, and then we'll send them offers in the mail. So if you're wondering where those offers in the mail come from, that's where they come from. So all this type of information is gathered by these major credit bureaus. And if you think about it, maybe not all this information is correct because they're gathering from lots of different sources. Some is fed to them, some information that they go out and gather. Sometimes people's names get mixed up and wrong information gets on wrong reports. So I think the major thing to think about here with your credit reports is a key issue is get copies of your reports and review the information to make sure that it's correct. Because this information is getting fed over to the companies that compute your credit scores. And if it's like the old saying goes, if it's garbage in, it's garbage out. So you can get free credit reports, what we see here at annualcreditreport.com, what we see here. So you can get a free report from the major providers, the three major ones, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion once a year or so. And during 2023, I think you can get one every week or so. So during COVID or the like that's out there, they said people may need to take a look at their credit information sooner. So the main thing we want to take away from credit reports is if you haven't taken a look at them in the last year or so, look at all three and review the information, see if it's correct. If there's information in there that's not correct, contact the credit bureau to have that information adjusted. So that's your credit reports. So now we have our credit scores. So companies put together your credit scores. Fair Isaac Company is probably the one that's used the most that's out there. That's what FICO is short for. We see FICO up here on the slide, the Fair Isaacs Company. So FICO, the companies that put together your credit scores, they take the information from the credit reports and then they analyze that data and they compute a credit score. So that one number reflects your credit worthiness. So it's a quick way for a lender to get a handle on how credit worthy are you. So that's why that credit score is important, because you can think about lenders that are out there. There's a lot of information that they go through, and using this credit score is a quick way to sit back and say, okay, I can get a pretty good idea of how this individual manages credit by taking a look at that credit score. So a company like FICO that's out there, Fair Isaacs Company that's out there, takes this information and they gather it in different ways and they weigh it in different ways. And we'll take a look at some of the ways that your FICO score is calculated to compute that particular score. So it's based on that credit report info. So that's why we want to make sure that info is okay. And the higher the number is better. And we'll take a look at the FICO score in a second. So there's different types of scores that are out there. So you don't have just one credit score, there's multiple scores out there, but the FICO standard score is the score that's used the most often. So that's what we're going to take a look at. So how are those credit scores used? They're used not only by lenders, but by insurers, by landlords, by utility companies, and by employers. So if you think about it, there's a lot of people out there in the marketplace that are making a judgment about each of us based on those credit scores. So that's why it's important. That's not the only thing they judge it on. So for example, lenders look not only at our credit score, but they take a look at our income level, how long we've been at a particular employer. They take a look at certain levels of debts and the like, but the credit score is still a major part of what's looked at. And the credit score will impact our access to credit, what types of loans that we qualify for, how much a lender will lend us, the type of interest rates we pay, and other types of things. So how can you obtain your credit score? So if you go to that annualcreditreport.com, they'll send you your free credit reports, but you'll have to pay for your credit score. That's in there. But there are ways to get your credit score for free. The most common way now is, it's not unusual now to take a look at your credit card company. Maybe a couple clicks on their website gets you right to your FICO score. So both of the credit card companies that I use do that. And that would be a good place to check. Other places that we see here: bank, mortgage lender, auto lender, and a credit score service. That's outstanding. So that's a general look at credit scores. So now let's take a look at FICO scores. Remember, FICO is Fair Isaacs Company. This is the standard calculation that FICO uses, and this is used for most credit evaluations that are out there. And we can see the scores here on the left-hand side, and we can see a move from the lowest score out there is 300 up to the highest score that we see here of 850. So when taking a look at credit scores, I like to think about, let's try to get on the road to 800. So no matter where an individual falls between 300 or so in here, a goal should be to kind of look to get into that exceptional category. That's where about 20% of consumers sit in that particular category. The average score is about 700. And we'll talk over the next few slides as we go through on ways to not only manage your FICO score, but to increase it over time. Again, on what I call that road to 800. And it can get a little bit complicated when you really dig into some of the stuff, but big picture wise, when you think about your FICO score on what I call that road to 800, the first thing you want to do is you want to pay your bills on time, every time. The second part is you want to keep your credit card balances low. The third is you want to be mindful of your credit history. The fourth is you want to improve your credit mix. And the fifth is one we already talked about in a little bit of detail, is review your credit reports. Now, if we look at your FICO score, we see that different items are weighted differently. And the biggest weighting is your payment history. So that's the one we're going to focus on first, because that has the most impact on your overall credit score. After that, it's your amounts owed. That's 30%. The length of credit history is 15%. So those three together are 80% of your FICO score. So we're going to focus mostly on those. And then new credit and types of credit are both about 10% of your score. So let's take a look at payment history, which is 35% of your score that's out there. So as I mentioned on the last slide, pay your bills on time, every time. It's the biggest factor that weighs into your FICO score. So it reflects whether you have paid past credit accounts on time, and the longer the payments are past due, the greater the reduction to your credit scores. Now, normally a lender won't report a late payment over to the credit reporting bureaus that's not at least 30 days overdue. So if you missed a credit card payment and say, gee, it was due yesterday, I missed it, from a credit score standpoint, if you immediately make that payment, it shouldn't impact your score. It may impact how much interest you pay on the score and on your card and late fees and those types of things, but shouldn't impact your actual credit score. So it's key that if you want to not only maintain, but move your score up over time, that you pay those bills on time. And the easiest way to implement that is automate, automate, automate. So use technology to the extent that you can set up automatic payments. So for example, if we're on your credit cards, at least set up that the minimum payment is made on a monthly basis automatically, so you never miss that payment. So it doesn't somehow fly under the radar screen and you miss it. Because if you miss it and then it gets reported over to the credit bureau, it sits on your credit report for 7 years and impacts your score for that period of time. And the longer it's not paid, the bigger the impact it has on your payment history again, which is 35% of your score. So anything you can automate, simplify your life and maintain and improve your credit score by automating it. Now, some bills are more difficult to automate. So I paid my mortgage off about 4 years or so ago, and I'm going to use the mortgage example again a little bit later on to show how it impacts another piece of your credit score. But now my real estate taxes aren't included as part of that mortgage payment, which I used to pay on an automatic basis. So I never missed a mortgage payment because it automatically came out of my checking account every time for that whole 30-year period of time. But now that the mortgage is paid, I got to pay those real estate taxes. So I have to list on my calendar. So it's on my computer, it's on my phone, it's on the wall. I put it in multiple places, set reminders for myself so I pay those real estate taxes when they're due over time. So automate where you can, but you'll have some payments maybe where you can't do that. So you might sit back and say, well, all this automation stuff is great and all these reminders are great, but I need money to pay this stuff that's outstanding. So that's maybe where I think the EY planners can help some folks. If you're sitting back and saying, I need help taking a look at my cash flow, putting a budget together, maybe putting together a debt management plan, the EY planners can help you with all that type of planning, as well as help you with the credit score information that we're talking about here today. But right after you take a look at those credit reports and make sure they're clean, that everything on there is accurate, the next step you want to take a look at is tackle that payment history, automate where you can, and if you can't automate, make sure you have a tracking system in place. Now, the next category here, this amounts owed, is 30% of your score. To me, I think this is one of the more difficult areas for people to understand and manage, because some people come to me and say, well, I use my credit cards, but I pay them off every month on time. Isn't that a good thing? And I say that's absolutely a good thing that you pay your credit card in full and on time. But in addition to that, you need to take a look at the amounts owed, which is 30% of your score. So this reflects the total amount owed on all accounts, as well as the amounts owed on individual accounts. So for example, let's say you have a credit card. I'm going to use some big numbers so I can do the math in my head. So let's say you have a $10,000 line of credit on your credit card, and you roll up 5,000 of charges on that card in a particular month, and you pay it all off on time. And you do that every month during the year. You'd sit back and say, well, I use my card, I get my cash back or my points, it's all good, I pay it on time. What could be the problem from a credit score perspective? The problem is this first bullet we see under how it can be improved, keep revolving credit utilization ratio below 30%. Once you go above 30%, the algorithm that FICO and some of these other companies that keep these scores, those algorithms start to get a little bit nervous and they start to lower your credit score. So if I have a $10,000 line of credit, I do not want to go over $3,000 in a particular month. If I do, it's going to start knocking my credit score down, even if I pay off the card every month. And that's the piece that I think kind of people are a little bit surprised about when they hear that. And if you want to get on the road to 800, what we talked about earlier, you're going to have to get that credit utilization ratio closer to 10%. So you need to not only not go over the 30, but get it closer to 10%. That's on each individual card and all cards combined. So you can see it's a little bit more difficult to manage this way. So we see some little tips here. Pay down maxed out cards first. If a card is maxed out, it's constantly pushing your credit score down because that utilization is well over 30%. So you want to spread charges over multiple cards to keep them 30% or less on each card and on the cards totaled together. Transfer high balance cards to existing low balance cards. The next bullet is the one that I use, pay more than once in a billing cycle. So I'll go in once a week on Monday, I'll look at my couple cards and see what's going on in there. So not only do I get a chance of maybe catching some charges before they get out of hand if somebody has my credit card number or whatever, but I also can take a look at, am I sneaking up to 10% utilization on that? If the answer is yes, I make a payment at that point. And there's times where I'll make 3 payments a month just to manage my credit cards, to keep it at that 10% level or below. Another thing you can do is request a credit limit increase. So you could sit back and say, if you increase my credit limit, immediately my utilization ratio will drop. So if you request a credit limit, that's a hard hit on your card. So that'll have a slight negative over the short term to your credit score, but over time that should be offset through the fact that your utilization will be lower. But you need to make sure though that just because you got a higher rate of utilization, you don't jump up and use more of that credit line at that particular point. Also use credit cards for necessities and what can be paid off each month and maintain an emergency fund. So I do think this category out of the ones we're going to take a look at is the one that's the most confusing here because of that utilization ratio. So remember, not over 30% over time. And if you want to get closer to that, you want to get on what I call that road to 800, closer to 10% utilization rate. Length of credit history. So that's 15% of your score. So the credit score companies, FICO and the like, take a look and say, well, how long have you had, say, a particular credit card? And the longer you have it, the longer that credit history. So you don't want to just get rid of a long running card. You might want to sit back and say, I may not want to use it as much that's outstanding, but if I have one that I've had for a long time, and then maybe a couple others that have relatively short term, if you close that long running card, it's going to impact the length of your credit history. So maintain the long running cards, don't close them. Use that card periodically but wisely, and don't open too many new accounts too rapidly because that'll start to push your credit history to more recent rather than long term. So new credit is 10% of your score. So these are your recent attempts to attain new credit over time. And the more you apply for credit, the greater the reduction to your credit score. So it doesn't mean you never apply for credit, but you only want to apply for credit as needed. And asking for an increase in your credit line on your card, what we talked about earlier, that's asking for new credit. So maybe every year or so, you might want to do that on a card so you can push down that utilization ratio. When shopping for a loan, do so in a short period of time and try to do some research ahead of time to see whether you'd qualify for a loan before actually applying for them. Okay, so that way you might want to sit back and say, well, hey, if it doesn't look like I'm going to get this, maybe I'm not going to apply for that, and use that as one of those hard hits against my credit report. Also avoid the retailers' credit cards, because the retailers, if you have 20 cards out there with all these retailers and you get them all at once, that's a lot of new credit that's outstanding, and that can hurt your credit score. So types of credit, this is the final one we'll take a look at here, 10% of your score. So what's this? It reflects the mix of types of credits and loans used. So FICO takes a look at both revolving credit and installment debt. So revolving credit would be your credit cards, and installment debt would be things such as those would be mortgage loans and car loans and student loans and the like. So the more you have a mix, say a couple credit cards and then a couple installment debt, you have a nice mix of credit that's there. The less diversified, the greater the reduction to your credit score. So I had mentioned earlier that I paid off my mortgage about 4 years or so ago. And when I paid off my mortgage, my credit score dropped. It dropped about 20 points. And the reason was I don't have a diversified mix of credit anymore. I have a few credit cards outstanding, and that's all that I have. My installment debt is gone. So when you look at the algorithm, the scoring system that FICO uses, they look and say, well, you're not as diversified anymore, so you're going to drop your credits. We're going to drop your credit score. So that's another area where people look and say, well, gee, that's a little bit funny, because same as we looked at earlier, the people that were paying off their cards each month might have been reducing their credit score, not because they were paying off their cards each month, but they were utilizing too much credit. In this instance here, you'd sit back and say, well, this guy paid off his mortgage. He must be a better credit risk, but they're actually saying, no, he's worse because his diversified mix went down a little bit. So it's not a big hit. As we can see here, it's 10% of your total score outstanding, and I still have a few cards, but my credit score did drop because of that. So some different things here, how you can improve this: utilize as appropriate a mix of types of credit and loans. So have a couple credit cards, even if just for emergencies. Don't use your credit card for all major purchases. So student loans for education, auto loan for vehicle, home equity loan for home repair. So those would all add to your mix of credit over time. So that's really that road to, I call that the road to 800. So we talked about a lot of things, but pay your bills on time every time. Most important thing to take a look at. Keep your credit card balances low. Certainly pay every month if you can on that. That's out there, but you don't want to go above that 30% utilization rate. Bring it down closer to 10 over time. A lot of these things that we're talking about, not going to be overnight changes. We're just going to try to turn our financial situation in that direction and start moving towards a better credit score over time. Be mindful of your credit history. So keep those longer term credit cards in place. Even if you don't use them that much, it keeps that credit history. Again, that's 15% of your credit score. Improve your credit mix where you can. We just talked about that on the last slide. And again, the first thing to do, review those credit reports, because if there's inaccurate information being fed into those scores and it's impacting you in a negative basis, you want to change that. So let's take a look at establishing credit. So let's say you're new and you're just establishing credit. So some tips to establish credit: start small. So apply for a small personal loan, a very low limit credit card, a secured credit card where you put some cash on deposit, so say $1,000, and then they give you $1,000 limit. So that enables you to establish a payment history with that particular card. A retail charge card, we just talked about them and said don't get a whole lot of them, but a retail card and a gas card tend to be easier cards to get, and you can establish some credit with those. Use a cosigner, become an authorized user. My son, he's a senior in college. He's an authorized user on my credit card. So even though I'm making all the payments, he's getting some credit for that as an authorized user. So that's actually helping to establish his profile. And also, what about adding data to your credit profile? So we talked earlier about the lenders send stuff over to the credit bureaus, and then the credit bureaus go out and take a look at what's available in the public marketplace for different facts on your situation. So we talked about things like bankruptcies and tax liens and stuff like that we'll get. But what about stuff out there such as, well, I've been paying rent for a while. I've been paying utility bills and phone bills and cable and internet and all that kind of stuff. Can I somehow include that in my credit score? And you can do that through what are called these credit boost services. Now, it doesn't make a major hit. It's not going to increase your credit score by 100 points. It might be more like by 20 or 30 points or so, but it does help show that you're paying your bills over time, and it can help boost your credit score. So there's many services that are available that are out there, but watch out for some potential fees. Might not be in the actual service, but it might be in different things that they're trying to sell to you and those types of things. So the use of a credit boost service might be something to talk to the EY planners about before you actually set that up. So these are some different actions you can take a look at. Don't want to overwhelm yourself in the process that are here. You might sit back and say, well, let me just pick a few of these that I want to put into place. Certainly the most important are to obtain and review your free credit reports, and then take a look if there are any errors. And if there are, you want to dispute those errors on those reports, and you can call the EY planners about the processes on how you can do that. So that would be the first step if you haven't done that yet. Identify a source to obtain your credit scores. So most of you can probably get easy access through credit cards that you have. And then once you've done those steps, then you can move through the system. Again, I would start with the big hits. So the 35% first is pay your bills on time and put that system in place to pay your bills on time. Then move to the next one, which is maintenance of that credit utilization, that 30% ceiling. We don't want to go over that ceiling on that, and we want to try to get it closer to 10%, move slowly to that over time, and then we can implement some of the others after that. So EY Navigate, so there's an evaluation here, and also you'll get a link to that EY Navigate digital website if you like. So if you text workshop PBUCC to the number that we see here, 609-644-9622, you'll receive a link to both a workshop evaluation as well as the EY Navigate digital website. And now we're at the point, if there's any questions that anyone has, there's none in the chat. We don't have a bunch of people here that are attending, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to come off mute and ask the question.
Don, I didn't see any questions, but I just wanted to say thank you very much for the presentation today. It was very interesting and informative. And if anyone does have the questions, because this will be recorded so people can come back to it later, they can always call E&Y to discuss this or other topics in the future. So Don, thank you again for your time, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thank you, Travis, and have a great day also, everyone.